Hi everyone, this is Matthew McKenzie here, doing another presentation regarding unpaid carers. Not an easy subject, this one, because it's on empowerment, but specifically care empowerment, and that can mean a lot of things. Specifically, if you're involved in shaping service, I'm sure it's part of this talk anyway. I'm sure I added a bit on that, but for most of this topic, it will be on the experience of caring for someone and being empowered on that in order to shape better outcomes for the person you're caring for and for yourself being an unpaid carer. When I'm talking about carers, I'm just sort of referring to those who are providing care, basically for free, to be honest, even though they may get some form of support from the government, usually from CARES assessments. But anyway, this topic is on what does care empowerment really mean? So the first thing really what I want to look into is the focus on, who are unpaid carers. And before I even continue on that, if you feel you like hearing these types of videos or are interested in the situations unpaid carers find themselves in and perhaps solutions as well, do subscribe to this channel, care in mind, or give this video a like. But going on to this particular topic anyway, empowerment and unpaid carers. What is it? What is an unpaid carer? Well, as you can see from here, usually what I personally think myself, most of the time it's going to be close family members. They have a vested emotional attachment and interest in regards to their loved ones. It might change if you're caring for someone with mentally ill health. They might end up being a close friend or someone that has knew the person going through mental ill health. But usually, when people think of unpaid carers, it's going to be family members, perhaps friends, not much of the time being neighbors, but we can include them. And I've mentioned already, they're going to be practically doing that for free. It's unpaid. It's not going to be some paid to do the role like a care worker, or sometimes they can refer to themselves as carers. And this is usually care for someone with a physical or mental health condition, usually very severe. You're not going to be just being an unpaid care for a week. Um, it's going to be for the long haul, and sometimes in certain conditions, it may improve for one moment at a time over a certain period, but then over the length of time, that condition will deteriorate, requesting support from the unpaid carer. So it could be mental health, could be disabilities or age-related, hence elderly, or even parent carer. It doesn't have to be elderly. It could be you could be caring for your child. So why the focus on unpaid care empowerment? Because as I've mentioned, there's different types of empowerment, and I'm going to just focus on the main one, really, what I feel, which revolves around the issue of providing unpaid care. Without a doubt, unpaid care is our backbone of the community care, to be honest. They're doing it for free anyway, and there are millions of them. Yet they often face significant emotional, financial, and social strain. So empowering them is in the best interest of the community, because if they aren't empowered, then more likely often walk away or will succumb to those things I mentioned, financial and social and emotional strain. So what we don't want really is that they are forgotten or exploited or overwhelmed. Hence, we've got Chaos Week coming up in June. So that's about a week away, I believe, by the time of this video. Uh, and it's to raise that awareness of unpaid care, and it's about protecting those who give a lot of their time, a lot of their lives. They do sacrifice a lot in order to support those that are going through a really difficult situation regarding their health and well-being. So, what's the core concept of empowerment? I keep going on about what empowerment really means. Empowerment for unpaid carers usually means dignity, support, and a voice, so carers can be heard. There are key aspects to this, though. As you can see, the last bit I've forgotten to add that to the animation. It isn't charity, it's justice. What does it role with, revolves around justice anyway? Well, the recognition. If you're caring for someone, you're not recognized in doing so, then you're going to lack the support and resources you may need to carry out your role as an unpaid carer. So for the role to be acknowledged, it is essential. And if you're an unpaid carer, you will feel valued from that. I'm not saying it's going to solve your situation, but you feel like, you are doing the right thing, and you are appreciated in doing so. I've just mentioned this. If you're empowered in your role, you should really be supported. And to be supported means access to resources. Access resources, I've not mentioned here, would be perhaps split down into information, advice, advocacy, even forms of someone stepping in for a while so you can take a break. And also access to networks. I run a number of carer groups, and those can be considered networks. So carers are not left unpaid carers is not left on their own, wondering what on earth they're doing. Autonomy is being respected in the knowledge and care choices. To be honest, you don't really have to provide unpaid care. It is a choice, but it's a difficult choice to make. And if you've done this for a number of years, then you do have a lot of knowledge to share with others. And this can also be knowledge to health and social care professionals. So they should respect unpaid carers who know the cared for most of all. That is a lot of knowledge built up. We also must respect unpaid carers for their choices. Again, they can walk away. They don't have to be tied to it, but the sacrifice is huge to do so. And this is one of the most difficult one. I do feel there's a bit of a power dynamic in this one on both ends. If you're involved in shaping services, you should be having a seat at the table. But I'm going to focus this mainly on how someone provides care to the loved one. They still should have a seat at the table in making decisions that will affect not only the person being cared for, but the carer themselves. This is not easy in the mental health circles because of confidentiality and, again, the autonomy of the person going through mental ill health. They also have a decision. So there might be a bit of a tug of war on that one. But if you're caring for someone long term and they're going through those conditions, the carer should be acknowledged in what they are trying to do, get better outcomes for the person in receipt of mental health care. But this doesn't extend to every ill health condition. Resilience is something that, again, it is empowering, but it's not something that appears straight away. It's built up over time, especially through going through difficult experiences, hence building strength in regards to what the carer has struggled against. And that strength could be through knowledge and taking a break. Again, not an easy thing to get hold of, but that's how I sort of see resilience, and that's a form of empowerment. So as I mentioned, it's not just charity. It's not just being kind to unpaid carer. It's borders on carers' rights. And one of the reasons I'm doing this particular lecture is, again, to remind others that they do have carers' rights, even if it's just on the focus of empowerment. But there are many others concepts that can promote and enhance carers' rights, which I'll cover perhaps later on, perhaps next month. So, why people are thinking, what on earth mention care empowerment? Why should that be important to an unpaid carer's role? So the reason for care empowerment is we will now look at the challenges unpaid carers face on why they would need care empowerment, because people might be thinking, well, you're just sort of giving things to carers they might not need, and that's not really the case. Unpaid carers often sacrifice their own well-being to care for others. So what do they face? Well, depending on the illness someone is caring for, especially if it's chronic, carers will be isolated. So their social lives and relationships obviously will suffer because of that. We also got financial hardship. Again, there's an issue regarding care allowance. But if you're caring for someone long term, it could be a number of years, and you often have to be there, you're not working. So there's going to be lost income. It's going to be not just income issues, but career disruption. You're not really investing in your own career. And when I mean limited benefits, you really are scraping the bottom of the barrel when it's coming down to getting support from the local authority or government regarding benefits. We also got burnout. Again, it does depend upon the condition. Some conditions may not ask that much of an unpaid care, while others are really critical, where the life of your loved one is hanging in the balance. Because of that, you more likely will be caring long term, sometimes during heavy, difficult, traumatic experiences. So little or no respite because of resources that are affecting local authorities. There's also a high risk of emotional and physical exhaustion. And then if you're thrown into the role of an unpaid carer, you don't really know what you're doing. And that's not to say that's your fault. It's not. We, as unpaid carers, are trying our best, really. And there's certain conditions that are very difficult to care for. So with that lack of training, that trickles down to other things that you're going to make mistakes and you'll have to figure things out alone. Then you've got the systemic neglect. So, really including in healthcare decisions. And I did mention the mental health situation, a really tricky one because rightly so, at times, not always, mental health survivors should and often try and get to choose those that support them. And this becomes a problem if there is a lack of acknowledgement on them, on their needs. As I mentioned, it rises and falls. So at times they're very clear on what support they need, and then when things hit mental health crisis, they're not so sure, but it's their right. But this can extend further if an unpaid care is not identified or they're left excluded from decisions, and that may lead to systematic neglect. And this could be down to resources as well. In fact, I'm practically sure a lot of it is usually down to resources, hence a lack of care support officers or social workers. So this may cause a lack of empowerment when it comes to unpaid carers, mental health carers, as far as being acknowledged for their role. So empowering unpaid care begins with seeing them, and I've just ended on, a situational identification. If you don't see an unpaid carer, how can you identify them? And that would mean a lack of empowerment if a carer isn't identified. So what does empowerment look like in practice? It's all fine to say that carers need empowerment, and I'm saying all unpaid carers care for all different conditions as long as it's long term. Unpaid carers are empowered when they're listened to and included in care planning and are provided with information that can help their care and role. It's obviously far more than what I'm saying, but one of the core focuses that a carer is seen and listened to and included in making those decisions. I'm not saying the unpaid care will be correct and right in everything. They obviously won't because they're learning as they go along. But obviously around later on down the road, they've picked up a fair bit of knowledge and it should be included. Forms of empowerment for unpaid carers can include access to respite, even though it's very difficult these days, the lack of resources. But the ones that perhaps a bit more easy to get access to would be training, and that could be at hospital services or local care centres, or even if you're looking at the mental health aspect, you're looking at recovery colleges. And also, to be fair, access to counselling. As I said, mentioned before, the caring role can be quite a traumatic, emotional, draining role. But having access to those things will cause more focus on empowerment for unpaid carers. mentioned this a few times already. Empowerment, where it looks like in practice, where carers would actually receive clear and practical information relevant to their role. So I'm not saying that information is going to be spot on most of the time, but it will help carers make decisions when they are caring for someone, whether it's mental or physical health. I think this is probably the most difficult one, but when it comes to empowerment, it's spot on. Carers will know their rights and what they're entitled to. It's not just carers allowance. It's basically, I should have really put down carers' rights per se. There's a whole lot regarding what carers' rights look like. The reason this is difficult is because you could know your rights, but still you can't exercise them. Or even if you do, the result isn't what you expect. You'd have to almost be a lawyer to understand the carers' rights and how to apply them and be your own advocate. And it's a difficult experience. You're actually butting heads with health and social care. But when it comes to empowerment, this is actually the core concept of it, knowing your rights and your entitlements to it. Again, if you're new to the care role, there's no way you're going to know it. And this will probably come through series of mistakes, not being included, and maybe hearing from other carers who've gone through those very difficult decisions and roles. This is something I focus on a lot regarding what I do as a content creator, networking with other carers, whether it be at the care centres or for groups. But again, it's a form of empowerment for unpaid carers. So being connected to peer networks. I run a couple of peer groups, community groups. So as I mentioned, if you're isolated as a carer, which can easily happen anyway, then there's a lack of empowerment. But as soon as you connect with others, then you feel that you're related, you feel you're connected, and you feel your role as an unpaid carer, the identity becoming a lot more stronger, and you can actually have an idea of planning for the future and picking up tools and tips to cope in regards to your caring role for your own well-being. So the idea really behind this, and this is not just it's very brief in regards to empowerment, but it's a start. It's about giving carers space to breathe and not just survive. Um, the reason I put it in that way is because unfortunately, even if I said these a care empowerment in practice, it is difficult to even get access to these sort of things. So you're almost hanging in there, if you know what I mean. Without these things, it becomes a difficult resource to get access to. So when it comes to care empowerment, what are the real life impacts of care empowerment? I'm not going to start mentioning organizations, groups, specific tools that can empower the unpaid carers experience. So this will probably more likely reduce stress and burnout, situations where your finances have not been hit so hard. I think on the next slide I mentioned specific groups. Improved confidence in your care role, and that's definitely on the information you're given or links to groups that you would start to access. And I always say to unpaid carers, do register at your local care centre to access those groups. Greater ability to advocate, not only for your loved ones, but for yourself. But I think that even though it's empowerment, it does take a while to do that. Better outcomes for themselves and the person they care for, and a stronger sense of self-worth and community. And again, I've mentioned quite a few of these things already in the previous slide. So how communities and service help when it comes to empowering carers? And everyone has a role in care empowerment. They might not think they do, but this does affect the role when it comes to carers. Well, I mean, unpaid carers, and that could be obviously, I mentioned them a few times, your local authorities, especially if they have a carers lead. Do inquire if your local authority has a carers lead on who's responsible under the Care Act 2014 on counting or identifying carers and seeing, what support they get. And also they're responsible for the local care centers, especially when it comes to contracts. So local authorities offer accessible care assessments and respites, and even carers themselves can hold the local authority to account on those things. I think this one's really difficult and depends on training. Not every GP surgery is the same, but they do have important decisions when it comes to unpaid carers and the cared for. One of the main roles when it comes to carers is identifying and referring carers to support. This might be done through social prescribers that may be based at the GP practice site. This one's perhaps one of the biggest ones, charities, and I did say local care centres. There are forms of charities, but do have major national charities, Carers UK, Carers Trust, and specific health conditions can also act as forms of charities, Parkinson's UK, Dementia UK, Macmillan for Cancer, Cancer Care, Bipolar UK. So I think you sort of see what I'm getting at. You also got certain CICs, the community interest groups that form up through specific local areas. Worth attending them, finding out more what they do for either the cared for or yourself. And the idea is creating safe spaces, identity, even empowerment, to be honest, groups and training. I think again, I mean, there's a new law that's been set out. I think it was released early last year on those who are working and caring. So there's never a better time, especially in the UK, to get more care-friendly policies and flexibility in your care role when it comes to employers. Tricky one. I mean, I mentioned this last because I don't think this is always the case, but neighbors and close friends, not friends, but close friends, do reach out to them in order to get practical help. But a lot of the conditions I've mentioned do come with a lot of stigma, unfortunately, and that can sort of push the unpaid care away, unfortunately. But they can be an important chain in that link. Empowerment is a shared responsibility. Don't think the care and role only happens to just a few. If you're of a family unit, you more likely will be caring for someone or being cared for yourself. And even without that, that might be the situation. So taken from my groups that I do cover Southwark, South London, Southwest, sometimes West London. These are the things I've picked up from my groups that I thought would be useful for this particular session. Someone in my group mentioned they gave up their job to care for their mother at first. They felt invisible, but joining a local care group changed everything. And that was someone caring for someone with dementia from my Lambeth group. From another group I do, at a quote, and these quotes are powerful, they just needed someone to say, look, you're doing great. I'm mentoring, new carers like myself. And that was again a form of empowerment for a young adult carer in South London. So the idea really behind this is that unpaid care role and strength is incredible. They just need to be seen and supported in order to provide empowerment to their role. And the last bit on this is, the call to action. How can you support unpaid carers when it comes to empowerment? So acknowledge them, don't let unpaid carers go unnoticed. Listen to their needs and feedback, especially when it comes to services, health and social care services. Share resources and referrals, even a small signpost, can actually change a life. Advocate for better policy, funding, and support systems. It's not always going to be an easy and pleasant experience, but I think it's an important role to take if you're an activist, which I am. I do sometimes go off and develop materials in order to raise that awareness. When we empower unpaid carers, we're investing in the very heart of our communities. As I said, it's not an easy role. They save the NHS millions, in fact, billions, actually, I would think, each year. So it's important to acknowledge that one day people will have to sacrifice a lot to provide unpaid care. Now, this is the end of this particular lecture. I do hope it makes some sense. Empowerment is an important aspect to an unpaid carer's role. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and if you do, give it a like, share the video, and do subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again next time.